next thing we're going to do is show you how to lay these files onto tracks within Camtasia. The track is where you will be, that's where you basically pull the file to allow you to edit it or manipulate it in any way that you need to. So let's take one of these students. We'll take this one right here and we will pull it down. You just drag from here and pull it down to this black box area here. And you'll notice it says track 1 here and track 2 here. It gives you 2 tracks to start with. You can add more, but now you can see here that we've got this student's performance file, and it's here on the track. A couple of things. It should show you a picture, which is at the beginning of the file. In this case, we've got a black square because this student has started out with a fade to black. If it started out with this writing without that fade right at the beginning, you would probably see the writing here in this black box here. If it started with her playing, then you would see the first frame of her playing, and that would show up in this square area here. In addition to that kind of a thumbnail, you will also be able to see the audio waves right here along the whole track if there is sound. Now if you don't see that, that indicates there's probably a problem, that the file didn't come with sound, or that there was some error in the student recording or transmitting it to you. But yeah, you should be able to see the audio waves here. Now, the one thing about when you're editing is often you will have one track on top of the other, and you can switch between the 2 tracks, or sometimes you can just put another file after the file that you have initially. So we'll go over why you would maybe do it one way or another. For our purposes right now, just to show some basic ones, we're going to stay on this same track 1, and let's say we're ready to put in the next student. We're going to come up here and grab the next student, and we're going to put her right here, back to back. And in this case, you can see that there is this thumbnail picture of the very first frame of her recording. That'll help you kind of know who's, where, but it also, the way it's titled again, you can see that it has her name, and it has the name of the piece, the name of the composer, and the name of the movie that the music is from. Now we can go back and we can look at this. We haven't done any edits other than place both of these back to back on the tracks. But let's just look at this. If you hit the space bar in Camtasia, you'll notice this line here with this head up here. This is called the playhead. This is showing you where the playhead is playing. Basically, that's the point at which the video is playing. Much like on an old record player, the old needle going along the record and kind of showing you where you are on that record. That's what this playhead does. Some of this may be very basic for some, but we try to give as many of the basics as possible, assuming that you've done no editing of this kind. And that way, if you have, you can skip these parts. If you haven't, then it'll definitely be helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the space bar, and we'll watch as this playhead tracks along. You can see right here, as soon as it hit these waves, you could start hearing the sound. Of course, up here is the viewer, the source viewer, and you can see what's playing. This is also what's going to show up on your final video once you've edited everything. So this allows you to monitor what's going on. So this looks great. So this student, we've got good lighting, good audio. You can go in and manipulate some of that if you need to, but this is looking good. So let's scroll down here to the end of this student's piece. So we'll see that it stops here. Okay. Now you'll see as we made that transition, it was pretty abrupt. We went from here to a very abrupt change, and you can, I mean, it's abrupt for several reasons. One is we don't have any transitions, but also just going for the lighting is so different, and it's a completely different person, different angle. So that can be somewhat, sometimes that's actually an effect you want, but generally you're probably going to want transitions between your tracks when you're changing students. Now, in addition to this, you're going to want to do title cards and that, or you may want to. That's something we do just so that everyone can see at a glance who's playing and the piece and everything. So those you would submit, if you had title cards, you would want to put that in between the two tracks. But for now, we're just going to show you a simple fade transition. So to do a transition, you're going to go up here to all your options that you have in Camtasia. Remember, if you don't see one of these areas that I'm talking about, you might need to go down to this More button and it will show you your other ones. These I think can be out of order depending on what you've used, so you may not, and the version of Camtasia you're using, so you may not see things exactly as I'm showing here. In this case, we're looking for transitions, and it's right here. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And then we've got a whole bunch of transitions here, transition types. And this can be good and it can be bad. It's great if you like variety, but it can be overwhelming if you don't want all these or you don't know what they do. Now, the cool thing about each one of these is you can hover over it and it will give you an automated view of what that transition is going to do. So in this case, we're looking at this zoom in, and it's playing it over and showing you it's going to go. So if you have two sets of mountains, these orange mountains and then these black and white mountains, you can see that this is zooming. They're both zooming in, but the one completely goes out of the frame and the other one fills it in. So that's showing you what that does. If and you can go to any one of these and look at this random dissolve, and you can see exactly what it's doing. So that's really good. Now, because there are so many of them here, you may end up finding a couple that you like, and it might be you don't want to go through the hassle of trying to find where it is. You can always do a search up here. So we're going to focus on just some simple fades today, just to get an idea of how transitions work. So I'm just going to type the word fade rather than go up and try to find where fade is in all of this. If I just type in the word fade right here, then it just gives me these 6 options, which is a lot less than what we had before. For our purposes today, we're just going to do a normal fade. And if I hover over this, you can just see it kind of just one disappears and the other one appears. And that happens simultaneously. So we're going to take this, and here's where kind of the automobile analogy of having an automated car comes in. You can just take this effect, click on it, hold down your mouse, and drag and pull it down to the timeline and put it here. You'll notice that there's these green kind of almost bracket looking things that appear. That is the transition. There are these 3 lines here. If you click on that, that'll select the transition rather than the track itself. And then you can come up here and it will show you the name of the transition. It will show you that it's a transition here. And then the name, in this case it's just a normal fade. And then the type, which is, if you go into these, it's another way of getting into all those other transitions that we looked at over on the left graphically. Here they're just all by words. So we're going to keep it with fade. We won't get too much into these options here. Reverse will just take whatever special effects happening and reverse it. Now with a simple phase, you're not going to see much of a change, if any, if you reverse it. But let's say one transition, if we come over here, I'm going to get out of here, and let's look at these these arrows here. If we look at this, the arrows come left to right. If you did a reverse, they might just go backwards. The arrow itself would probably still point the same way, but the animation would reverse, and you might have the full arrow going right to back to left instead. Let's see. This bar wipe, instead of the bars starting at the left and going to the right, if you hit reverse, it would start at the right and going to the left. So that's what this reverse mode does here. It just depends on if you like it how it is or if you want to change it up. You can click on that. Use trim content. It's kind of hard to explain, but in a basic term, it means as the transition's happening, if there's movement in either one of the two different clips, it'll keep that movement continuously going. Rather than if you don't use trim content, the best way to explain it, I think, it's not a full explanation, but it kind of, there's a pause as the transition's happening before the motion kicks in. It's just a couple of frames, but sometimes it's noticeable. Sometimes you want that and sometimes you don't. So you can play around with that and decide if you want to use it. For right now, we're not going to click either one of those, but we're going to come back here. We're going to back up just a few seconds. And by the way, here's the timeline, and you can see how far we're in. So the way you read this is, these are frames, and they're in the example I have here, I'm working with 30 frames per second. So you're going to have 30. It'll go up to 30 here where these 0 zeros are, and then it will click over to the next section over here, and these are seconds. So if we're at 2 minutes and 30 seconds here, go down 30 of these notches and you'll be at 2:31. So we can start here just to show you how that goes. So here we are at 2:30:00 right here. Now as the playhead moves, watch that change. You can see that rightmost group of numbers going up, and it will go up until it hits 29, and then at 30 it kicks over, and you see this goes from 30 to 31, and now you've a full second has passed. Now you can have higher frame rates. You can have high definition frame rates of 60 frames. You can have lower ones of 25 or even lower, like 15 or 10. 30 is kind of a standard. If you want the real high definition, you can go for it. Just know that your file size likely will be bigger because it's packing in twice the number of frames within a second. So just keep that in mind. The stuff I do, my files are already so big. Once I throw in a lot of effects or transitions, that I just keep it at 30 generally, just so it won't be even more huge and unwieldy. But you can decide how you want to set that. Okay, so we've gone back a couple of seconds here. Now we're going to watch this transition and see, what it looks like here. So let's try this. Now you can see how that faded in. And to me, that was much easier on my eye. So again, that's a very simple transition. But once you've learned, for example, to do a simple fade, then you can come over here and play with whatever you want. So let's say, to delete this, this transition, you want to click right on those 3 lines. It'll turn yellow, and then you can hit delete. Let's say you want to try something a little fancier. So let's try this arrows one. We would put that in there, back it up again, and then we can see what happens. Now we have kind of a graphical animation, and that looked great too. So part of the fun of this is playing around with some of these transitions and seeing what works for you. And keep in mind, the ones I'm showing you here, this is a fairly recent version of Camtasia. It's 2022, but I think they've already got a 2023 out, and sometimes there are upgraded versions within that year. And I think you can I'm not sure, but I think within a certain time frame, if there's an upgrade, you can get that free. And every time you pay, you can get like a year or 6 months worth of maintenance help and that. So sometimes it's worth it, especially when you're starting up. Just that money you're buying the software also can pay for some external support, so it might be worth it.